What if I told you the Mötley Crüe launched their European debut with blood in their teeth and a bass hurled like a weapon? They bit Eddie Van Halen, smashed Malcolm Young's head into a wall, and got blacklisted from a 5-star hotel before the first encore. Then they hit Donington and turned piss, eyeballs, and daylight into legend. Oh, and Vince had a legend as a mentor who taught him more than just kicks and backflips. Here's how all that went down.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
January 1981, Los Angeles. 4 dames, 1 mission. Vince Neil, Nikki Sixx, Tommy Lee, and Mick Mars lock into place, and Mötley Crüe is born. The vision: loud, loose, and unapologetically obscene. Early gigs felt less like concerts and more like street fights. No polish or plan B, just pure voltage and the smell of hairspray igniting under stage lights. Around the same time, another piece of metal history is taking shape. Malcolm Dome publishes Encyclopedia Metallica, a title that would echo louder than he could have guessed. That same year, Metallica forms, and while Dome never claimed direct credit, the speculation stuck. Dome's own rise runs parallel. From Record Mirror in the late 70s to Metal Fury in the early 80s, then landing on the launch team of Kerrang! In 1981, he becomes one of metal's loudest scribes just as the genre begins to detonate. And for Mötley Crüe, the early way of doing things was simple. Look dangerous, sound dangerous, be dangerous. They were building both a band and an identity, and it was definitely working. But the local buzz was only the fuse. It was the explosion that would come next. Before Mötley Crüe had a record deal, before all the chaos in the courtrooms, Vince Neil had a mentor. David Lee Roth started showing up to their gigs. The Troubadour, Whiskey A Go-Go, just another face in the haze of club lights and cheap beer. But Roth wasn't scouting for a thrill. He was watching the energy in the crowd and that potential. And then he pulled Vince aside. They'd meet at Kenter's Deli on Fairfax. No entourage or egos, just 2 guys talking shop over pastrami. Roth laid it out: how to handle record labels, what to demand in publishing, how to survive a band without tearing each other apart, touring, press, industry games. It was a crash course in everything that Vince didn't even know that he would need. And for Vince Neil, this was more than advice. He called Roth the first guy who really offered any kind of help, an established star giving a club rat the blueprint. And just months earlier, Vince had been selling bootleg Van Halen shirts out of his mom's car trunk, printing them himself. Now the guy on those very shirts was sitting across the table explaining how not to get screwed. And Roth didn't just see a band, he saw what they could become. Mötley Crüe was about to become really hard to ignore. Fast forward to May 29, 1983. Heavy Metal Day at the US Festival. Glen Helen Regional Park turned into a battlefield of pure leather and sheer volume. You had Van Halen headlining, Ozzy Osbourne, Priest, Scorpions, Triumph, Quiet Riot, all locked in. And early in the day, before the dust settled and the beer ran warm, Mötley Crüe hit that stage. They were not headline, they were not legend, but they played like they were. No filler or restraint, just a nice smack of the head that screamed one message: we definitely belong here. And it wasn't just another gig. This was their first real taste of full-on national exposure, thrown in the ring with the biggest names in the game. The crowd, hundreds of thousands. Every scream, every fist in the air, every shred of approval totally mattered. And for Vince Neil, standing on that stage just feet away from Van Halen's camp, the moment circled back. From those days of printing the bootleg shirts to sharing a festival with the band that he idolized, the Crüe had officially broken out of the clubs and were now in the bloodstream of American metal. September 3rd, 1983. Oh Lord, you really expect me to pronounce this? Betzenberg Stadion, lit up with a lineup that read like a hard rock who's who. Whitesnake, Blue Oyster Cult, Thin Lizzy, Saxon, Meatloaf, Twisted Sister, Motorhead, a full-force European festival. Thunder rolling through Germany with every set. Now, Mötley Crüe was not on this bill, but the stage itself told the story. Hard rock was global, loud, and moving fast. And the festival circuit was actually becoming this proving ground, and bands who hit those stages were shaping what metal looked like from Tokyo to Texas. And for Crüe, this was the world they were about to enter. August 1984, Stockholm. Monsters of Rock tour was circling Europe like a pack of wolves, and the bands were gathering. AC/DC, Van Halen, and yes, Mötley Crüe. Backstage, hotel bars, alleyways behind venues. This was a tour, but it was also a collision. And Mötley Crüe, still high off the US Festival breakthrough, arrived in full chaos mode. Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee were in what would later be dubbed their Dark Angels phase, a stretch of time where they literally bit people. Literally. Friends, crew members, other musicians. Sometimes it drew blood, sometimes it didn't, but that wasn't the point. It wasn't about vampirism. It was about control, shock, dominance. The way somebody would poop in your bed while staring you straight directly in the eyes. It was a twisted ritual to prove that they were the wildest creatures in any room that they walked into. And later in The Dirt, Nikki Sixx framed it, saying that they wanted to leave their mark. The European crowds were about to meet them, but first, Stockholm got the warning shot. It was supposed to be just another night, bands gathering before the next leg of Monsters of Rock, but instead it became something much wilder. Nikki Sixx sank his teeth into Eddie Van Halen's shoulder. No warning or apology, just a bite out of nowhere. Eddie spun around, stunned and furious, and then Tommy Lee took his turn, another bite. Eddie was like, man, you guys are fucking crazy. And then Vince Neil tried to join in, went for the bite too. By this time, Eddie was the wiser and he wasn't having any of it. He grabbed Vince by the face and slammed him into a table. Chairs went flying, tempers exploded. Mötley Crüe versus Van Halen. No instruments or crowd, just bare-knuckle lunacy backstage in Sweden. What started as a twisted inside joke became this full-blown brawl, and the Monsters of Rock hadn't even started yet. Malcolm Young wasn't laughing. As Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee tore through Stockholm on their unhinged biting spree, Malcolm watched from the chaos mount and issued a warning. Don't you fucking bite me. And the message was crystal clear. Nikki did not back down. He grabbed Malcolm by the hair, slammed his head into a wall. Tommy Lee later claimed that Malcolm was bleeding from the ear, and then, in true Crüe fashion, Tommy went ahead and bit him as well. Needless to say, Malcolm was a bit pissed off by the whole thing. It wasn't a prank anymore, it was a line that was crossed. And then somewhere between the festival stages and hotel lounges, Tommy Lee ended up squaring off with David Lee Roth. Not biting this time. Just a full body collision, a blur of flying fists, egos, whatever's on the table that they ended up rolling across. According to The Dirt, it looked more like wrestling than an actual fist fight, pure lunacy with no clear winner. But Roth, ever the showman and martial arts enthusiast, didn't fold. He held his own. By some accounts, he even enjoyed it. Acrobatics met drumstick rage and the surreal sideshow nobody asked for, but you couldn't stop watching it. And of course, manager Doc McGee had managed chaos before, but nothing prepared him for this whole Stockholm thing. And Doc ended up spending the summer of '84 in full-time apology mode. Every day brought in a new crisis. Somebody bitten, somebody bleeding, somebody threatening to pull the plug. McGee described it as pretty much like herding a bunch of feral cats. He had to do damage control with the whole Eddie, Vince, Nikki, and Tommy thing. And he literally had to say to Tommy, "You don't bite people. What are you, a friggin' dog?" And it wasn't just about bruised egos and torn skin. McGee genuinely believed that Mötley Crüe was on the verge of being kicked off the tour. The promoters were getting nervous. It was actually less reckless behavior and more actual career-threatening behavior. And of course, the Grand Hotel in Stockholm had hosted royalty, diplomats, and of course rock stars. But after that night, it drew the line. Following this insanity, between the biting sprees, backstage brawls, and hallway head smashing, management had seen enough. Mötley Crüe got the boot. And they weren't alone. Members of Van Halen and AC/DC, whether biters or bystanders, were also shown the door. And whatever had happened in those halls had crossed the line that the hotel had. But Mötley Crüe saw it as a badge of honor. The press didn't care who started it. They cared that the band was wild, unhinged, and about to hit Donington with a reputation that preceded them. They weren't just the new kids anymore. They're the out-of-control kids. And that, of course, is what the listening population wanted. So August 18th, 1984, Donington Park, UK, Monsters of Rock was already a titan among festivals, but that year it detonated. At the very bottom of the bill, walking straight into a sea of denim and leather, came Mötley Crüe, bad boy glam newbies, unproven to this UK crowd. Fresh off getting tossed from a Stockholm hotel, their reputation hit British soil before the plane did, and they opened the day just after Accept, right before Y&T and Gary Moore, who both turned in smoldering sets that the crowd would still be talking about days later. But Mötley Crüe didn't come to blend in. They hit that stage loud, brash, and fully weaponized. Makeup smeared, attitude dialed past 11. The chaos they stirred across Europe now finally had a spotlight. Ozzy brought the blood, Van Halen brought the Riz, AC/DC closed it with fire, but Mötley Crüe cracked open the day with that pure reckless energy that screamed, "We're not here to wait our turn." And for that moment, they didn't. Donington baked under blistering sunshine. It was a balmy summer's day, no rain or mud, just tens of thousands packed shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the sonic demolition to begin. And the crew kicked it off early, still riding the fumes of their scandal-soaked arrival. Ben ended up even running overtime. and they're totally killing it on stage. And usually when bands run overtime as the opener, the plug gets pulled, but nobody pulled the plug this time. Wasn't perfect, but it was loud and fast, and enough to make the sun-drenched crowd turn their heads and remember the name. And of course, Donington had a reputation. Opening bands knew the deal. Bottles, mud, pee, whatever the crowd could get their hands on. It wasn't personal, it was tradition. When Vince Neil came prepared, he showed up in a hard hat. And when he showed up about it in a pre-show Kerrang interview, he just said, I don't care about the image, I just don't want to be an easy target. The glam could wait, self-preservation had to come first. And after the set, Vince claimed they got off easy. No major objects, no full-scale assault, the crowd liked them, and he felt relief. But Nikki Sixx had a different story. He got nailed in the mouth by a flying cup of pee, tasted it, gagged, kept playing, standard UK festival greeting, no drama, just pure disgust. Then he got Tommy Lee. A cow's eyeball landed in front of his kick drum. Not a metaphor, a literal cow's eyeball. And his drum tech, Clyde the Sly Duncan, spotted it and was stuck to the riser after the set. Tommy would later say that it topped every projectile he had ever seen. More twisted than darts and even a little bit scarier than knives. And he gave it to the crowd, said they won that round. No fight, just respect for the absurdity. Mötley Crüe had survived Donington, but they hadn't gone unnoticed. And as the final notes of Mötley Crüe's Donington set tore through the afternoon air, Nikki Sixx did what any self-respecting chaos agent would. He hurled his bass into the crowd. No hesitation or ceremony, just hurled that thing like a grenade. A classic mic drop, Crüe style, before the world became so lawsuit happy, because you certainly couldn't pull that off today. And what became of the bass? Well, nobody really knows. One eyewitness swore they saw a guy walking away from the festival, bass over his shoulder like a war trophy. So it's somewhere. But for all the pea cups and cow parts flying, there was real noise coming back from the field. The crowd dug Mötley Crüe, and they had certainly arrived by that point. And they didn't need top billing to make an impact. They just needed a good stage and a little daylight left to burn. To my subscribers, thank you so much. You frigging rock. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe, fill a nice cup with gold water from deep within your loins and chuck it at the subscribe button. And then smack a nice big cow's eye to the like button. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.